Here's something that sounds almost too simple to be real. Imagine you're sitting at your kitchen table on a random Tuesday night. Rent is due next week. Groceries just got more expensive again. You check your bank app, and it's fine. Not amazing. Not terrible. Just fine. Now imagine someone leans across that table and says, if you put away $500 a month, you could become a millionaire. Your first reaction probably isn't excitement. It's doubt. $500? That's not pocket change. That's a car payment. That's part of your rent. That's breathing room. And millionaire? That sounds like something reserved for tech founders, lottery winners, or people who got in early. So your brain quietly dismisses it. But what if the surprising part isn't whether it's possible? What if the surprising part is how ordinary it actually is? Let me explain. Most people misunderstand what makes someone a millionaire. We picture high incomes, big risks, genius stock picks, some secret strategy the average person doesn't know. But when you actually zoom out and look at the math, it's not dramatic. It's patient. The problem is, patience doesn't feel powerful. We're wired for visible progress. If I go to the gym for 2 weeks and don't see abs, it feels pointless. If I invest for 1 year and my account only grows a little, it feels underwhelming. Our brains crave immediate feedback. Compound growth doesn't give you that. In fact, in the beginning, it feels almost insulting. Let's say you invest $500 a month into a simple, broad stock market index fund. Nothing exotic. Historically, the U.S. stock market has averaged around 8 to 10% annually over long periods. Some years are bad, some are incredible. But over decades, it tends to grow. Let's use 8% to stay conservative. If you invest $500 a month for 30 years at 8% average returns, you end up with around $745,000. That's already significant. And you didn't pick stocks. You didn't start a unicorn company. You just showed up consistently. Now stretch that to 35 years. You're around $1 million. Not because you invested $1 million. You invested $210,000 of your own money over 35 years. The rest, almost $800,000, came from growth. That's the part most people underestimate. They think wealth is built from what you put in. It's mostly built from how long you leave it alone. But here's where psychology comes in. The first 10 years feel slow, painfully slow. After 10 years of investing $500 a month at 8%, you'd have roughly $91,000. That's solid. But it doesn't feel life-changing, especially when you've contributed $60,000 of that yourself. You might think, that's it? 10 years for this? And this is where most people quit. Because our brains don't naturally understand exponential growth. We think linearly. If I saved $6,000 a year, I expect $6,000 more each year. Straight line, predictable. Compound growth isn't a straight line. It's a curve. The real acceleration happens later. Between year 25 and year 35, something wild happens. The growth itself starts adding more each year than your contributions. You're still putting in $6,000 a year. But the market might be adding $40,000, $50,000, $70,000 in a good year. At that point, money is working harder than you are. But you only get there if you survive the boring phase. And that's the emotional battle. Because $500 a month doesn't feel glamorous. It feels like restraint. It means maybe you drive the car a little longer. Maybe you don't upgrade apartments right away. Maybe you say no to a few impulse upgrades. And in a culture that constantly tells you to level up, restraint feels like falling behind. But here's the reframing. You're not giving up $500. You're buying future freedom at a discount. Let's think about what $1 million actually represents. It's not yachts. It's not private jets. At a conservative 4% withdrawal rate, $1 million can generate about $40,000 a year without depleting the principal too quickly. That's not luxury influencer money, but it's power. It's the power to say no to a toxic job, the power to reduce your hours, the power to take a break without panicking. That's what makes $500 a month meaningful. Not the status, the options. And here's another uncomfortable truth. The real variable isn't the return rate. It's time. If you start at 25 and invest $500 a month until 60, you likely cross that $1 million line. If you start at 35, you may need closer to $900 or $1,000 a month to get there by 60. Same person, same discipline. 10-year difference. Time is the multiplier most people ignore because it doesn't feel urgent when you're young. When you're 25, 60 feels abstract, distant, almost fictional. When you're 45, 60 feels uncomfortably close. And that's when people try to catch up. They take bigger risks. They chase trends. They invest in things they barely understand. Not because they're reckless, because they're anxious. Money decisions are rarely about math. They're about emotion, fear of missing out, fear of being behind, fear of regret. But the slow $500 strategy works precisely because it doesn't rely on emotional spikes. It relies on consistency. It's almost boring by design, and boring is underrated. Think about it this way. Imagine two people. One tries to double their money every year with high-risk trades. Some years they win big, other years they lose half. The other quietly invests $500 a month into a diversified fund and ignores the noise. 35 years later, the second person is statistically more likely to be wealthy. Not because they were smarter, because they were steadier. Steadiness compounds. Now let's bring this back to real life. Maybe $500 feels impossible right now. That's real. Life is expensive, especially if you're supporting family, paying off debt, or living in a high-cost city. But the deeper lesson isn't the exact number. It's the habit of turning income into ownership. When you invest, you're not just saving. You're buying tiny pieces of businesses. You're owning productivity. You're participating in growth instead of just funding it as a consumer. And psychologically, that shift is powerful. You stop seeing yourself as someone just trying to survive the system. You start seeing yourself as someone building within it. Even if you start with $200 a month, even if you start late, the act itself changes your identity. You become someone who thinks long-term, and long-term thinkers make different day-to-day decisions. They're less reactive, less panicked by headlines, less tempted by every new trend. Because they understand something simple. Wealth is a byproduct of time plus discipline, not adrenaline. There's also something calming about knowing the path doesn't require brilliance. You don't need to predict recessions. You don't need to time the market perfectly. In fact, trying to do those things often hurts more than it helps. Historically, markets have recovered from crashes, wars, recessions, pandemics. Not instantly, not smoothly, but over time. And time is the silent partner in this equation. The turning point for most people isn't when their account hits $100,000. It's when they realize they don't have to outsmart everyone. They just have to outlast their own impatience. When you internalize that, something shifts. You stop obsessing over daily market moves. You stop comparing your progress to someone who got lucky on crypto or a startup. You start focusing on controllables, your savings rate, your spending habits, your career growth, your emotional reactions. And here's the practical part. If you want $500 a month to work for you, the first step isn't opening a brokerage account. It's creating space between what you earn and what you spend. That might mean automating your investments so the money leaves before you can second guess it. It might mean gradually increasing contributions each time you get a raise instead of upgrading your lifestyle immediately. It might mean building an emergency fund first, so you're not forced to sell investments during a crisis. None of that is extreme. It's steady. And steady doesn't get clicks on social media. But steady builds millionaires quietly, over decades. I also think it's important to say this. Becoming a millionaire on paper doesn't automatically make you happy. If your relationship with money is rooted in fear or comparison, hitting a number won't fix that. But having financial breathing room does reduce stress. It gives you margin. And margin changes how you experience life. You make decisions with less pressure. You negotiate differently. You sleep differently. That's the real promise hidden inside the math. Not luxury, relief. So when you hear $500 a month makes you a millionaire, don't hear it as a guarantee. Hear it as a demonstration of how powerful consistency can be. It's proof that wealth isn't always explosive. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just a series of ordinary months stacked on top of each other. One automatic transfer at a time, 1 year at a time. And maybe right now you're thinking, I'm behind. Almost everyone feels that way at some point. But the beautiful thing about compound growth is that it doesn't care about your past. It only cares about what you start doing next. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to max everything out immediately. You just have to begin. And then protect the habit. Because 35 years from now, you won't remember the specific nights you skipped a random purchase. But you will feel the difference between having options and having none. So maybe the real surprising math isn't that $500 a month can grow to $1 million. It's that something so ordinary, so unexciting, can quietly change the trajectory of your life. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily. And sometimes, steady is exactly what we need.